So maybe it's time to start. So, dear distinguished President of the Parliamentary Conference, dear scientists and colleagues. So the title of this conference is Living Along Gradients Past, Present and Future. And we can think it has many meanings. One of the meanings could be the evolution of this Congress. It was first 3 separate gatherings of scientists, oceanographers, biologists, geologists, and then it involved a truly interdisciplinary Congress, and which now is the 11th, as you already know. And the last Congress 2 years ago brought a new component into this evolution, the Policy Day. Before going further, I would like to mention that this session is video recorded, so just to take into account everything that you say may stay somewhere. Not really to scare you about making even provocative comments, because this is what we expect also. So our speakers and panel members today, they also represent some kind of gradient in terms of knowledge transfer. Producing knowledge, synthesizing knowledge, developing management tools, and transferring finally to policies and politics, or vice versa. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this second Policy Day. And today we are discussing about the role of science in evidence-based decision-making. We apologize some mixed wordings were in the title, which is in the program, but this is really what it should be. It is science, is always on evidence-based. The question is how it is used in decision-making today and in the future. So the session is going to proceed in such a way that we will first have Director of Mistras Evian, Sif Johansson, giving an introductory keynote speech. Then we will have from the other extreme of knowledge transfer gradient, real politician, Ms. Carola Veit here, who will give a comment on her, based on her experience and the politician's point of view. Then we will proceed to the panel. We have here expert panelists, and I'm going to introduce them, each of them, when they enter behind the table here. So Sif Johansson. Sif is a marine biologist originally, and she was a coordinator of the Swedish marine research in eutrophication in some years ago, and she also worked for 2 years in the European Commission DG Environment as a national expert, and now she is the director of the EVM, the Mistras Council for Evidence-Based Environmental Management. So, Sif, the floor is yours.
And good afternoon, all of you. Yes. In this, I'm working now with systematic reviews, and this is what. So I'm going to talk a little bit what is a systematic review and how does it differ from other more traditional reviews, and then end with some words about communication and how to communicate science to policy, as the theme is. So systematic reviews in environmental areas actually started with this man, Andrew. Or to be very true, it started with his son, actually. His son was born too early and was taken care of at the hospital, very, very well taken care of. And then Andrew asked, how do you know what to do? Or how do you know that? And then all the people at the hospital, they pointed at this Cochrane. They said, oh, we just followed the Cochrane recommendation. Of course, Cochrane was a medical doctor, and he started to develop in medicine this way of synthesizing information to really get the message of what do we know in this issue and what do we don't know in this issue. And of course, his way was that we have to really be sure for medical treatments and so on. And today it's very routine to do it. They have done, I don't know how many, 100,000. And actually this way of doing the synthesis is also regarded as the gold standard in medicine. So what Andrew did, that was that he translated, or I could say maybe adapted it to environmental issues in 2006. It took some years. And then he initiated a network, Collaboration for Environmental Evidence, that we are part of, coming back to that. And today I can say that this is not only in medicine and environment, there is also used this kind of method to evaluate or synthesize knowledge in education, in social welfare, in many other areas too. The collaboration of environmental evidence, as I said, it is a network, but already from the beginning, the goal was to support the synthesis of evidence to policy and practice. So that was the reason from the beginning. So the guidelines that he developed from the beginning, but now it's still under development from all of us working with it, this has a section of how also to go further with the science to reach the policies. He also started this journal. It's in peer review, as you see. It's also an open access journal called Environmental Evidence Journal. There we can publish both the planning document for a systematic review and the report itself. Today, the network have 6 centers. It's the red stars. It's the Bangor, where Andrew Poulin comes from, and then we have in Stockholm and Paris, in Ottawa, Johannesburg and Melbourne, and soon also in Santiago. It's coming on different places all over. And the thing that we have in common is that we use the same guidelines, but we always try to improve the methods for this synthesis. So first I'm now going to say something about what is the difference then. And I start with a traditional review, and then you may also ask if I'm not clear. But let's assume that this is the evidence base for a certain issue. And now we're talking about traditional reviews. I mean, I've done them myself. So then what do? You look around and say that, okay, in this review I have to have this article in, of course. And then maybe I also look in a database and try to find out what kind of articles you can find in that database. You know, maybe, or maybe you don't care, that there are also a lot of grey literature in this issue, but very seldom you include it in the review, in the scientific review. But the most problematic of all things, as I see it, is that you don't tell what you have done. It's no transparency in the process. This is a more traditional view. Yeah, we can go say that. Then if you want a result, you often say that, okay, so many scientists look it that way, and so many articles look it in the other way. This kind of a vote or quality bias that is not always, but there is a risk for that, I would say. Then we have a systematic review. Then you start with the same evidence base in the beginning, as I said here. I have also included the grey literature. And you start with a very exhaustive search. Of course you can't cover everything. There is a small part here that you don't cover, including grey literature. And then you start to look at different databases. You try as many as you can find, including grey literature. Grey literature, what I mean with that is that you're asking agencies or county boards or even consulting firms. And of course there's a problem with that, because you can't, there is a language problem. Because I mean this is doing internationally. But you do as good as you can. You took the big languages and try to reach part of it. And then you weight the studies. And you do that because you have a critical appraisal of all the articles you include. And then you do a synthesis. And then oops, that was wrong one. The most important of is that it's really transparent. So this one here. So every step, you notice every step, and you also publish every step. You say that, okay, I have excluded those articles because they don't have good statistics, or they whatever. So you also can see why you have excluded some articles. And you have included, you're telling the search strategy So you can follow, which means that this is, everyone can look at it, they can continue it a couple of years later, they can start there and then just complement it, or whatever. So I think that is the very good thing with the systematic review. And I'll just give you one example. And this is, in Sweden we have a lot of small lakes, and some of them have problems with eutrophication. And we have the Swedish Marine and Water Management Agency, that's one of the panels comes from, and they are responsible for the Swedish environmental objective zero eutrophication, which means that it's their responsibility to recommend methods how to decrease the eutrophication. And of course we have the Water Framework Directive, it's also dealing with eutrophication. And then they said, is biomanipulation a good way to do this? And why did they ask? Yes, because they know, because of a lot of international contacts, that you're doing that in Finland, you do that in Denmark, you use that method in Netherlands, but why don't we use it in Sweden very much? Is there something wrong? What do we know about it? And the theory is here, of course, that otherwise you put in pescivorous fish or you reduce the number of plantivorous fish to reduce algae, get better transparency, no eutrophication. So we did that, and you can see the results, not the result, but the process is shown here. If you just have this broad research, you got a lot of hits. Many of them, maybe 50% are duplicates. So let's say that we start with about 14,000 articles. You screen them on titles, that's very easy, it goes quite fast. It also reduces the number very much. And then you read the abstract screening and then you're looking for the relevance. Are these really good for answering the question that we have put forward? When you have done that, you retrieve all the full texts. There are some of them were not found, but most of them were found. And then you do this critical appraisal. And what a critical appraisal is, that we really look at the statistics, have they described the methods, do they have a good, if you say that you have replicates, is that described very well? Do the replicates, are they really replicates? And there's a lot of this kind of thing, more methodological, because of course we don't say that this is a good or bad article, but we try to, beforehand we decide that we look at those and those factors, and we call it critical appraisal. Which means that in this case, in the end, we could find that there are 123 lakes with a little more manipulation. The lakes were from Europe and they were from the North America. And I can say that was one of the restrictions in the search string already, that we say that, okay, it should be relevant for the Swedish environment, which means that we only looked at the boreal and Arctic temperate zone. We excluded the tropical zone from it from the beginning. But that is something that you do in the search process. So, to conclude here, I would say that this is another way to describe it. This is a very formal and rigorous process. It takes time. That is sort of the drawback about it. But the very good thing is that it's extremely transparent. You know what you have done. Everyone knows what you have done. It could be repeated. You can do it again. Other persons can do it. And it's also as objective as possible. You can't say that you are doing it objective, it's a little bit too much, but as possible, so much as possible. Then I will just mention there are something else too, because sometimes the questions are not so well formulated, they're broader. And then if you go for a broader question, your search hits will be too many. So then we do a systematic map. We use that method when we have a broader question, as I said here, and the aim is then to catalog. We don't read the full text articles, you don't do the critical appraisal or maybe some basic critical appraisal. Instead we do, if you imagine it's under a table and you have the intervention here and you have the outcome here. We have done one, for example, looking at how different ways of managing protected forest influence the biodiversity. Then we have the intervention. You can burn, you can graze, you have dead wood, etc. All this intervention here, and you have the biodiversity outcome, the biodiversity of insects, of lichens, of plants, or whatever in this. And then you can see, okay, we have a lot of information about this here. We know very much about how burning influence plants, for example. But we know very little of this. So this is a gap, and this we have a cluster. This is one way of thinking of what is a systematic map. But very often, when we present it, there's an object there. We present it like this, in a real map. But behind that map, you can imagine that table. So this is a study when we looked at the effects of agriculture management on the soil organic carbon. So each on this, you can click on each of these and you can get all the information about what kind of study, the authors, the title, even probably the email address to the author if possible. So this is an information that we have done, and in this case also we did it together with an agriculture agency. And already at that stage they were quite happy, because then they know what to do. Okay, we don't know anything about that, and then it's impossible. We have to find some financing to do more about this. The good thing, this is the one I showed, is also that if you have that table, you can start systematic reviews from that table. So in our case, we have those two systematic maps here, and then we have started to do, and this is ongoing systematic reviews. And half of the work is already done, because you don't do that up in the systematic work, in the map work, and then you continue with the systematic review. So this was about the science in this. Now I'm going to talk a little about communication. This is how I foresee where we have the best way of systematic reviews. There is research, of course, and there is people on the agencies, the people are doing recommendations, etc. And I've been working myself at the Swedish EPA for many years. I know that in the best of worlds I was able to read the science, but there is no time for that. So I would have been happy if someone had synthesized the science for me. The way we look at this is that it's not we who do this, or our board or someone else who should initiate the systematic review. It's actually the stakeholders. It could be the same hairs who do the recommendation, it could be other stakeholders who say that we need more knowledge about what is known about this. So we actually ask them. And then if it's okay, if we decide that this is a good issue, then we appoint the scientific group, and it's the science work to do actually to conduct the the systematic review. It's their work to produce the written report, to publish the written report. The stakeholders are involved when we plan to do it. I used to say that we are co-designing the project with the stakeholders, but the conducting is by the researchers. But then we also, because many stakeholders and also I would say other people don't read this part-time, very technical report, but they read the summary. And we always make a summary in Swedish and English, and we make a fact sheet, just 2 pages in Swedish and English. And as I said before, this is not only also to arrow back to the scientific community, because we also mention where we have the research gaps. So in this case, when we have this, we give these fact sheets or summaries to decision makers, and often we hope that they will ask the question that Andrew asked from the beginning, that is, how do you know that? And then it's when it's very good to have the systematic review, and they say, well, we have done it. We offer you to read this, but we have all the evidence here. So that's the way that, this is my last slide, and this is actually what I'm saying about now communication and this. We have assumed that to have a good communication, the good results that reach the decision makers, is that it's in this early stakeholder engagement, which means that it's they who suggest what we're doing, even if we have to do some scientific looking at it, this is possible, etc. We invite them to co-design the review. This is the planning document that we are writing together, and we publish it. When the draft report is ready, we send it back. I say have semi-public review, which means that we are sending it back to the stakeholder group that was engaged from the beginning for their comments. They don't comment on the science, but they could comment on wish that we should be more clear about this and what does that really mean and so this kind of comments. And then at the end, we also try to co-arrange the presentation of the result. There's much more to do in this case, I know that, but this is how we have to really try to get more science into decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation, and we will return to this question of information and communication a little later in the panel discussion. There's maybe time for one question at this stage. We will continue discussion later with you, dear audience, as well. But if somebody has a burning question, so it's possible to ask it now. Yes, please.
As a scientist, I have allocated myself 100% to science. So if my workload is 100%, what do you expect from scientists to allocate to these kind of processes where we summarize science but don't create science, basic science?
I would say that also the synthesis is a scientific process. The science in the group, we are working with the secretariat, we know the methods and we do a lot of things, that the legwork, you could put it that way. We used the meeting with the science group just to discuss the critical appraisal, the summary, how to analyze the data. I say this is a very scientific process. And you also got an extra publication.
Okay, thank you again. And now I would like to call on the stage President of the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference and President of the Parliament of Hamburg, Ms. Carola Veit, please. Ms. Veit has been a member of the Parliament since 2004, and she really knows the work of the political bodies inside out. She's a lawyer by training, and she has been dealing with complex issues such as administration reform, but also with other politically contentious issues such as neglect of children. And as a president of the parliament since 2011, she has undertaken numerous measures to restore citizens' interest in parliamentary democracy, especially focusing on young people. And not at least because we have been witnessing a period of so-called elite resentment, something that we in the scientific arena know too well. And we are very grateful that Ms. Veit could join us here today. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very grateful to be here, Professor Bartmann and Ms. Johansson, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference, let me thank you for inviting me to address this Baltic Sea Science Congress here in Rostock and to take part in this session here today where science meets policy. Well, I was asked to give a comment on the keynote and the key question of this session from the perspective of parliaments and parliamentary works. Before I go into detail on this topic and the raised question, let me make a few remarks about the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference. This conference was founded in 1991 with the primary goal of creating a platform for open parliamentary dialogue to establish the Baltic Sea as a sea of freedom and cooperation. While the earlier conferences primarily dealt with topics such as the democratic stabilization of the region and improving the critical environmental situation in the Baltic Sea. In the meantime, many other issues were also discussed, such as maritime policy and economy, green growth, climate change, education, minorities, NGOs, labour market and social welfare, culture, healthcare, and even sustainable tourism. For example, the 24th annual conference of the BSPC took place 2 years ago here in Rostock on the topic of innovation and social and healthcare, and we adopted a very far-reaching and detailed resolution about measures in the healthcare sector. And these results were based on a 2 years working group of our conference, as well as on the evidence-based scientific results in this area after many expert hearings, of course, if I may add that. So you can say this was one of many best practice examples where evidence-based science was the foundation of parliamentary decision making. The BSSC gathers parliamentarians from 22 parliaments and 5 parliamentary organizations around the Baltic Sea, including Russia and Norway, and thus constitutes a unique and comprehensive political platform for cooperation among all the EU and non-EU countries of the Baltic Sea region on an equal footing. So we agree upon comprehensive resolutions and ask for concrete commitments from our governments. And ladies and gentlemen, during the current Hamburg presidency, one of the priority issues is science and research. This is, of course, connected to the special engagement of Hamburg with the Baltic Sea Science Network and DAISY plus Trump. But we plan to also put a focus on the issue that is pointed out here and today. So that also means that as a part of this year's BSPC conference, we will not just realize what is happening at the moment, which is science meeting policy. With this focus, we are far exceeding this approach and supporting you as scientists of the Baltic area. I mean, this is the plan. So in our resolution from this year, we will probably support you, for example, by demanding our governments to intensify scientific cooperation in the Baltic Sea region, qualitatively and quantitatively, of course, to further improve the conditions of the Baltic Sea region in global scientific competition, to strengthen citizen awareness of education and science as important innovation resources, or to support bonus 2, for example. So, now I would like to share some thoughts on the question of the role of evidence-based science as a part of parliamentarian decision-making processes, as well as some small examples. So evidence-based science does not only play a crucial role in current decision-making, but has played a role both in politics and in political science for a long time. Machiavelli already ascribed a leading role to experts when he put it as follows. A smart prince has to select bright people, permit these exclusively to tell him the truth, but only with regard to what he asks of them. Yet he has to ask them about everything, listen to their opinion, and subsequently make a decision. So, this is a long time ago, and since the last decades of the past century, this topic has played a significant role in the political science discussions of the Federal Republic of Germany and far beyond, concerning aspects such as regulatory and technology impact assessment. A particular focus was regularly placed on the areas of environment and technology. A little over a year ago, the German Bundestag celebrated 25 years of technology impact assessment in the respective bodies of the German Bundestag, and instituted an office on technology impact assessment of its own for political consulting. In certain areas, it is considered indispensable to accept current scientific research results, even though science cannot always provide precise predictions. In Germany, as early as the 1970s, there had been an expert council for environmental questions, considering the respective scientific results into annual reports of policymakers and providing early recommendations for action. Well, it finally took more than a decade to educate Germans to separate their rubbish. But obviously this is something nobody would do without seeing any sense in it. So it would have never been able to implement it without a strong scientific argumentation about the necessity, without strong evidence-based facts and new technologies that first persuaded politicians and later a whole country. So, dealing with any kind of topic for us is simple, not possible without a common understanding of at least basic facts. And policy does undoubtedly rely on scientific findings, but sometimes it also doesn't, and for good reasons. I cited Machiavelli. There's one word in his quote that deserves special care: truth. In such a short statement, the word truth appears as if there was some kind of empirical reality, and only that one. Yes, policy is influenced by science, but we all know that science is influenced by interests in the same vein that policy is influenced by interests as well. Just a very, very simple example. On the contentious issues for parliaments is the ratio of childcare. How much personal and money does it take to adequately take care of and educate children in kindergarten? Well, a macroeconomist who asked for the effectiveness of the measure, maybe in comparison with other projects concerning non-endless budgets, will give you a complete different answer from someone who studied a social or ethical science, obviously. So oftentimes, if the parliamentary groups appoint scientists or experts to argue a point and collect information, the answers provided will be no different than those provided by the parliamentarians themselves. We very often have that. So if it's sometimes suggested that policy would become so much better if it was carried out by scientists, I just don't believe that. The truth is, there is not one truth. There are many truths. And it's the job of politicians to bring these truths together, find the biggest common denominator, and also experiment. And I mean, I'm sorry, but I can spare you the side note. Science itself also operates in trial and error mode often enough. It was the idea of the scientific community to introduce nuclear energy. By now we've gathered enough information to see the pitfalls, but progress will most likely take place because of trial and error. Sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail, but we have to keep experimenting. And in pluralistic societies, politics means the encounter of diverse interests and the orientation along majorities as part of political decision-making processes to find compromises. Could a parliament only consisting of scientists operate otherwise? They also would have to convey between several possibilities, not to mention the financial restrictions. So, ladies and gentlemen, take the deepening of the Elbe River in Hamburg, for example, in order to allow big container vessels to reach our port. Administration and politicians have had hearing after hearing, involving countless scientists and experts in order to judge whether or not this would have a significant negative impact on the environment. Of course, every scientist had a different opinion. Ultimately, as it is so often the case, the issue was brought before the courts, including Europe, where it is pending a decision for years now. So, truth isn't an empiric reality out there. Truth means trying, to the best of our knowledge and means of scientific inquiry, coming as close to the truth as we can. Ladies and gentlemen, to me, a very helpful tool to assess complex future circumstances has been the institution of committees of inquiry in parliaments. Scientists and politicians come together on a quite equal footing. For one, policy gets informed by scientific insight. Another important advantage is that scientists also develop an understanding for politics, where maximum demands sometimes have to be surrendered in favor of a simple majority in order to get anything done in the first place. But parliamentary instruments such as those committees of inquiry, expert councils, expert hearings, all that, are of course only helpful in the parliamentary arena if the best scientifics make themselves available to policy with their results, and if they are willing to introduce their scientific results in respective procedures and decision-making processes. And, to mention it again, the crucial reality of competing issues on the budget panel. So, in my consideration, we are faced with a situation where, thankfully, there is a dialogue between science and policy. However, all too often we have experts from one side to talk to experts to the other side. And all too often also the experts on the political side sit in some subordinate administrative unit. Great work is done there, no doubt, but it also takes a great effort, time and also luck for the development insights to work their way up to the top political level where decisions are ultimately made, and I think it's kind of the same approach also made. So in that sense, yes, dialogue between policy and science does take place, but it is conducted mostly at the executive level. In order to more strongly involve evidence-based science in political decision-making processes, not only is it necessary for policy to approach science, but also for science to bring results to policy and to take efforts to get involved in the political decision-making processes. In that regard, I would like to appeal to you to make yourselves and your scientific results available to politics and parliamentary decision makers for a close cooperation in order to effect best possible decisions on the foundation of evidence-based science. And well, coming to the 100% question of Mr. Bartmann, maybe it needs from 5 to 10% for that. So it's a very, I think it's very useful if a systematic method that makes it clearer for us is developed and applied, which helps to identify the wrong scientific insights and also for political decision-making processes makes it clearer. So, how about we make a start today again and continue this dialogue at the 26th Parliamentary Baltic Sea Conference in Hamburg, beginning of September. During our session on science and research, I invite the Baltic Sea Science Congress to send 1 or 2 more speakers to our conference in Hamburg to talk about the important nexus between policy and science and the main issues of this week-long conference you have here. Professor Bartmann was already so kind to agree to come and we would welcome more input from this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You gave a very good presentation about different aspects of the reality where the scientists live in the society. Now, unfortunately, Ms. Veit has to leave soon, so if you have any questions addressed directly to her, you should do it now, because then later when we are discussing, she will not be here anymore. So please, any questions to Ms. Veit? Maybe this gave so much food for thoughts that people have to sit, digest a little bit, and questions come then afterwards. Okay, there you have it.
Yeah, this was really a great overview and invitation for the scientists to participate with the dialogue. If we are asked from the scientific side, who and what discipline do contribute, of course we have several disciplines, from theoretical physics to biogeochemistry and biologists, and sometimes there's a scientific culture to discuss a lot of issues, ask questions, disagree in some of the interpretations, and we realized in our experience with politicians that this kind of scientific dialogue has some drawback when we talk to politicians, because this question marks we always put in our own results is hard to deal with on the political side. This is one aspect, so sometimes we are not clear enough, and we cannot clear enough, because science is not a 100% issue. On the other hand, on the other side, we as scientists see that politicians also are dividing in different, I would say, disciplines or resource. There is the environmental politicians, there are politicians for economy and growth, there are politicians for traffic and for science. So with proposals to each of these different political groups, we get different responses. So how can we make a better step forward in, on the one hand, bringing the scientific community to create common statement, and that's our business, but also for the political community to have some more coordination in the different resources.
I think we're sitting in the same boat in this question, sort of, because it's, well, the same problem we share. We have to not only maybe improve our dialogue between science and policy, but we also have to bring our results to the people and explain why we prefer this decision or the other. And I mean, you could say, well, it would be the best if no one would drive by car, because it would be good for the better for the environment. And then you have the economists, they say, well, we need traffic and we need to transport and all that. So it's our duty to bring it together, but I think it's also duty of scientists to cross borders and bring it together. So I think the only way is to prove cooperation and always like you presented us, to explain how you come to results, and it's the same we have to do. We have to become more transparent. Also, we're trying to do that, to make everything clear, but I think we can't stop this. We just have to think about new methods to improve this. The only thing we could do.
Okay, there's another question by our panelist.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sebastian Onger from the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam. Thanks a lot for this really interesting presentation, and also for referring to this example of the Elbe River and of the nuclear energy in Germany. And my question would be, I mean, we're talking about evidence and facts, but how do you react if evidence really point into different directions? As you have mentioned yourself, this was the case, or is the case with regard to the Elbe deepening, and how do you take into account the precautionary approach and sort of how to judge those different scientific facts being presented to decision making?
My colleague just says, well, at the end it goes to the court, but that's not the solution. That should be the solution. Well, it was the environmental stakeholders who brought it to the court. Well, there's always one point where you have to take a decision. You often have questions where you have really as many scientists on the one side as on the other side, and then you have a public who has an opinion maybe, and you have newspapers who have an opinion, and then finally you come to a point where you say, well, it has to be decided. And you again pointed out the examples I made, and I mean it's also quite expensive what we do there to experiment and to trial and error, but still there is no other way. And I think I mean, we are voted to take responsibility and to make decisions, take decisions, and maybe we are not re-elected if it was wrong. So that's, I mean, it's quite a simple process. You can, and everybody can join it, but we need the support of good advisors. That's all.
One more question there in the back row.
Hi, thank you for coming to talk to us. How differently is information provided by social sciences versus natural scientists? Because as the first question addressed, that often natural sciences aren't 100%, but neither are social sciences, so facts provided by social scientists are also not 100%. And so are they handled differently in the office? Like the way that if you're given information about a population, would be handled differently than about a natural system.
No. Yeah. Cool. That's good to know. But even though the humans are voting and not the animals, you know, so yeah.
Okay, so I think we have to go further, and thank you very much once more, Ms. Veit. Now we will continue with the panel discussion, and I would like first to invite Mr. Bodo Bahr, who is the General Secretary of the Parliamentary Conference since 2014, and in his previous position as a Vice Secretary General of the Parliament of the Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, he had very broad responsibilities of parliamentary committees, including international affairs, and he has also been involved in climate change issues and research program management. Then we have Professor Jakob Carstensen, who works as a scientist on understanding changes over time in marine ecosystems in response to nutrient management, fisheries and climate change. And you have been particularly active in transferring this knowledge to policies, as you have been responsible for the HELCO Baltic Sea Action Plan target revision, and you are giving advice to Danish Ministry of Environment on marine issues, and also you are the Danish lead of the Baltic Nest Institute that supports the implementation of HELCOM's Baltic Sea Action Plan. And you are also coordinating one of the bonus projects, bonus COCOA. Then we have Professor Mike Elliott, who is the Director of the Institute of Estuarine and Coastal Studies and Professor of the Estuarine Coastal Sciences at the University of Hull in the United Kingdom. And he has a very wide experience in researching, teaching and publishing and giving advice on many aspects of marine science and management. We have Mats Svensson, who works at the Swedish Agency of Marine and Water Management, and he is the head of the research unit of this agency, and he has been the member of the bonus steering committee since 2013. Dr. Sebastian Unger here is a scientific coordinator of Advanced Sustainability Studies, IASS, in Potsdam. And in your earlier career, you have also worked as a Deputy Secretary of OSPAR Commission, and before that in the German national positions. So we'll now start our panel discussion, and I'll make some questions, and then afterwards you, the audience, can have your questions. And I would like to start with Sebastian Unger. So IAS is actually very similar work as EVM, as it aims at merging all relevant type of knowledge, both within and outside science, in order to find solutions that helps initiate, support and scientifically accompany the transformation towards sustainable development. So can you, with a few sentences, explain if and how this evidence-based environmental management are applied in your agency? And maybe even more generally in Germany, if you can give kind of German national situation as well.
Okay, thanks a lot for this question, and perhaps to start with, I would like to give you a very brief introduction to the work that we're doing at the IASS in Potsdam. That's a research institute that was founded in 2009 by the German government. It's funded by our Ministry of Research to bridge between science and decision making, so at the science policy society interface. And at our institute, we are roughly 120 researchers engaging in different key transformation issues like climate change, the transformation of our energy system, the Energiewende, as we nowadays say in English as well, soils, food security, and also ocean governance. And this is really what has brought me to this meeting here today. And at our institute, we're following an approach. We don't call it sort of evidence-based. I mean, we're grounded in science, of course. We're following sort of general criteria for scientific excellence. But our institute very much works in in dialogue with decision makers, with different types of knowledge. So in addition to the scientific knowledge that is being brought by our researchers to the table, we are engaging in a dialogue with practitioners in policy making in these key processes. So I would like to give you two quick examples from my area of work. In our research group on ocean governance, we are focusing as a research institute directly on current key policy processes that are relevant at the global scale. It is the Sustainable Development Goals, the so-called SDGs that were agreed in 2015. And there's one goal for the oceans, SDG 14. And we are advising our ministries in Germany, but also UN agencies, very much on how to implement those sustainable development goals for the ocean. So based on our research as governance researchers, we have biologists, we have lawyers in our team, we are providing in discussion with the decision makers concrete advice how to make sort of best use in those global policy processes. Another example is the whole discussion on areas beyond national jurisdiction. So that are all these areas that lie beyond the national sovereignty of states, and there's no global agreement for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in there. And there's a global process going on at the moment in New York to develop a new global agreement for those areas beyond national jurisdiction. And here again we are working with our government to really bring forward the different knowledge from our marine research institutes working in those areas and bring those different types of insights into the negotiation process with our ministries and decision makers. Another topic, without going into detail, there's deep seabed mining. Again, there's a process going on at a global convention body to develop a new mining regime for those areas in the deep sea. These are sort of from our field in ocean governance, and here, as mentioned earlier on, we really understand that there are, from a governance research perspective, there is sort of evidence that are suggesting certain development of a regime and ideal cases, but in discussing within those global processes, different type of practical knowledge that is really important to come to good recommendations for the process, and we try to really take those different type of knowledge into account. Coming to back a little bit to the SDGs as a whole, our institute just together with different partners, including Future Earth, have created with support of our Ministry of Research a platform for the SDG implementation in Germany. And the 2030 agenda is really a complex process. It's 17 interlinked goals, and there's really no clear answer from science nor from decision makers how to best implement those targets that range from reducing poverty, securing food, to protecting the ocean. But it's providing a global plan for sustainability. So this is a complex learning process. Nobody has a good answer to that, and neither decision makers nor science. And with a platform bringing together those different types of knowledge, we are supporting now the German sustainability strategy in order to provide the best available knowledge to decision making.
Thank you very much. And next question is to Mats Svensson. Could you now explain with a few sentences how these evidence-based environment management are applied in your agency or in Sweden more generally?
Well, I'm coming from an agency where we are doing all kinds of, well, we have 3 areas of management, and that is water, marine environment and fisheries. And I'm having also a scientific background, and when I started with science, I thought, well, when we have the facts on the table, then the world will change, of course. But getting more grey hairs and so on, I've been learning it's not that easy. Of course, evidence-based science, and what Mr. IVM is representing here, is of course very, very good. But still, the kind of process of decision-making is not that easy, and very often it's compromises that you are not understanding fully then also. And I can also say that science can learn from the kind of policy world, and the policy world can learn from the science world also. And we'll take two very brief examples from that. There is one for anti-fouling purposes, anti-fouling paints, which is then containing TBT. We as an agency have been setting the kind of value for what we allow in the environment to 50 nanograms per kilo of dry sediments and so on. Which means that every port in Sweden has to be actually then corrected, and the sediments has to be taken up, which will then be too expensive. So there is nothing done instead because it will be too expensive. From that, there is a lesson learned that maybe it should be more advisable to have a higher value in the beginning so that you will actually then take action to the most severe areas before you will lower the value. However, then we have a lot of biologists working at the agency. It says, well, we have the biological value, biological effect at this level. So we should set the kind of level that we emit in the environment at that level, really. So that was not working. Another example is where the kind of policy work can learn from science, and that's from the fisheries management also. I know that many of you are familiar and maybe work also with the various kinds of ICES groups. Where the quotas are then, based on scientific values, are then giving scientific recommendations to the fisheries management on European level. But however, as you also know, that maybe still there are around 50 or 60% of all the various populations of fisheries are overfished. So that's also an area where the science have been actually raising their hands and saying no, 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 but for other reasons. They've all been setting the quotas higher than what has been recommended nevertheless also. So there is an area where we can actually learn from science and actually listen to scientists also. So these are giving a bit more of also light on that the decision making that is taking part of the politicians is not that easy as we may think then also, and it's not that rational either. However, we have to do the best by actually bringing up what we have and what we know for sure, and also know for sure by proven values, by evidence-based, for example. And that could actually be the basis for better decisions. But we cannot be sure that we're taking 100% good decisions nevertheless.
Thank you. Some of you may know that the basis of the bonus program is 100 million euros is very kind of legal. It is Parliament and Council decision, so it's really binding. And what is written in this law is that the bonus is a policy-driven program. And we have one bonus project coordinator here, and from bonus COCOA, and which investigates nutrient transformations and retention in the coastal zone. So could you now give some examples how COCOA scientific findings are used for practical management in eutrophication mitigation, and in that way fulfill this legal obligation to be a policy-driven research?
Yeah, I don't know if this one is on.
Yes, it is.
It is on. Okay, maybe I can just leave it here. Maybe I might just add to that I was also the fortunate coordinator of the predecessor of Bonus, which was the Bonus Plus, and we had a project there called Hyper, also which was doing a lot of policy relevant science. Before I actually address the question that you asked about COCO and how COCO has contributed to science or to policy decisions. I have a couple of remarks. I think first of all, I think it's difficult to attribute, you could say, decisions, political decisions to a single project. I think in science we often say that we stand on the shoulder of giants, and you can say that one scientific project builds upon not only one but multiple other projects. So the scientific community is an organism that support each other. We deliver information and knowledge to each other. And I think it's not fair to say that whatever is decided and it might be based on good science, that is solely relying on a single project. I think we're all contributing to that process, and I think we should continue to do that. The second remark that I'd like to put forward here is that there's a lag time. often we work on science, we try to develop new knowledge, but it takes time before that knowledge is actually making its way into decision making. And if you ask me right away now on an existing ongoing research project, how has that contributed, that might be difficult to address right now or answer right now. I can perhaps give some ideas about how I think it might do that in the future. But I think it's better to actually exemplify how scientific projects have actually contributed to decision making process. And that's why I mentioned the HYPER project, but if we go back to the bonus plus round, at least 2 projects comes to my mind that were actually contributing a lot to HELCOM activities. Markus Meyer from SMHI at that time, and now he's at IOV, he had the Eco Support project, and I had the HYPER project. And I think those projects were to a large extent involved in underpinning the Baltic Sea Action Plan. Markus Meyer and his project Eco Support were bringing together a lot of different modeling institutes. One of the good things about that project was that it somehow, you could say, circumvented the potential rivalry and, you could say, discussions that you can sometimes have in the scientific community, but may not necessarily be very beneficial if you want to convey scientific messages to decision makers. But having a project bringing, you could say, the experts together and trying to, or you could say, more or less forcing them to come to a consensus about how will the Baltic Sea develop under different scenarios in the future. I think that was a major milestone. If I take the other one, HYPER, also there the basis of HYPER, we already had a lot of knowledge, but we were bringing that a little bit forward in terms of understanding the processes that are actually controlling hypoxia in the Baltic Sea. We also support a lot on the target development for the Baltic Sea Action Plan, using that information to come up with, you could say, realistic targets for, what the situation, how the system might have or looked in the past before we actually started with excessive nutrient pollution of the system. So with that in mind, let me then try to give you perhaps some examples of how I see that cocoa in the future might potentially contribute to something, at least to decision making. And it's often, I like to make it very tangible in a way because, right now cocoa is much in my head, and we have produced a lot of interesting results. So one of the things that should be underpinning decision making for the Baltic Sea is knowledge and information and good monitoring. We have to know the status out there. And in cocoa we worked a lot with, you could say, new techniques to measure, you could say, process rates, etc. So normally a lot of the monitoring that has been ongoing in Baltic Sea has been based on, you could say, state variables, not understanding, you could say, the flow of material. But in cocoa actually we have worked a lot on, you could say, estimating what is then the flow material, because it's the flow material that you're actually controlling. It's not the state directly. Well, you control indirectly the state, but it's what you can actually manage is the flow material. So that's one part where I think we have contributed. Some of the methods that we tried out are probably not, you could say, realistically feasible in the standard monitoring program. Some of them have turned out to be, you could say, practically feasible. The other thing is that we put a lot more focus on the effect, or you could say, the coastal zone, how that operates as, you could say, an intermediate layer between all the inputs, the nutrients that come from land, and not only the nutrients, also the organic material, and what is being further delivered to the open Baltic Sea, where we have the large problem with hypoxia. In the Baltic Sea Action Plan, the nutrient retention is not directly, the coastal zone is not directly included in that one. It's indirectly included through the way that the model is set up. But it's the way that we can use the knowledge that we have from cocoa is actually to produce or to improve the models that we use for estimating what should be the nutrient reduction targets that we have for different countries to achieve these ecological objectives that we have from the Baltic Sea. So in that way, we have made a foundation for improving, you say, the decision models that we're using at present. And then finally, one thing that I like to draw forward in terms of what we have delivered or have investigated, and that's bringing focus also on not just nitrogen and phosphorus as important, you could say, flows of materials into to the Baltic Sea. Organic material is also quite important and has to a large extent been overlooked, and especially the processes that are governing, you could say, both the transformations and also transport of organic material into the Baltic Sea. So that we put, that specific topic we investigate a lot more, and hopefully all that knowledge that we built in COCO will come to the attention also of decision makers, and will help that that can also be included in future plans.
Thank you. And then Mike Elliott, so you have been studying science policy relationship with marine and coastal management for years, and what is your view about the main controversies and which hamper the knowledge transfer? And in this case we allowed Mike to show a couple of slides because the issue is complex, and I will put them on.
Thank you, Kajsa. I'm delighted to be here. In fact, at this time, I'm delighted to be anywhere other than in the UK at the moment, because it's chaos there. But that's politics for you. I guess I've been involved in the Baltic for quite a long time. I was involved in the evaluation of the Bireme project and the early bonus projects, the Baltic Stern and so on. And then recently, the Bonus Secretariat asked my institute to do a review of bonus and the way it is, the bonus projects and the way they're fed into policy. We did one looking at the science to policy links, and Pauline Snoche from Stockholm University looked at the science to science links. And I want to, we've just produced the report for this, and indeed a paper that's been submitted. I want to talk you through that. Now, one of the things that you should bear in mind is I come from an academic system. I used to work for the other SEPA, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, for many years. So I've been involved for a long time in the way science gets used in policy and that. The other thing that goes to our minds is in our system in the UK, scientists get gauged on many things, and one of them is what is called impact. And that is the impact of your science for society. And depending on the grade that you get for that, that gives you a certain amount of money back into the university for science. So it's really quite at the sharp end. We talk about science being delivered to this whole group of people, but they're not a common group. It's not just one single homogeneous group. We talk about stakeholders. And we can split those stakeholders into many groups. We have the stakeholders that cause problems or give us things from the marine environment. We have the stakeholders that regulate those people. The stakeholders that benefit from that. The stakeholders that are affected by the problems. And those that influence. And this is where scientists come in and academics come in as influencing them. And that. So if I take you through a set of what we call the 6 paradoxes of science to policy interactions, sort of things like that. Two fairly simple diagrams. The first one you see there is two very simple sort of who is it that's in this constituency to worry about problems in the environment? That's left-hand triangle there, and then who can do something about it? And you'll see at the side there, I've got a set of groups. Who is it that can do something about this and that? This gives rise to a set of paradigms, or paradoxes rather. And I'll just very quickly, in one sentence almost, go through each of these and that. The first one of these, if I can have the next one, Kajsa. Oh. Sorry. Okay, it's something that when you see it, I think it's very obvious, but the fact that it hadn't been put down in this form before. this dissemination diamond, and I should add, this is in a paper that Pauline and myself and some of the bonus people have sent off. So if anyone here publishes this before our paper comes out, we'll come after you. Okay, so this is the amount of information. And if you look at that, it's very straightforward. We are producing, as scientists, we're producing that big bulge in the middle. Now our monographs and our papers and so on. But actually, at the ends of the spectrum there, the general public is dealing in small and small amounts of information. Microsoft announced the other day that the attention span of the public is now 8 seconds. It was 12 seconds a few years ago, it's now 8 seconds. So they're dealing in these very brief things, tweets and so on. Going right to the other end, POTUS, you know who he is, he's also dealing in tweets at 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So we are producing a large amount of information, but we're producing it, if we want to get to either of these people having an influence, we're doing it wrong. We're doing it wrong. Now the problem is, do we dumb down our science, or do we educate those? I think Trump is past educating, but there you go. Okay, so knowledge volume is one of the paradoxes there. Another one is, and it was mentioned earlier, is when we produce the information, we produce it after doing our studies and writing the papers and so on, but the policymakers want it quickly. They want it now. They don't want to wait for the peer-reviewed papers to come out, so there's a problem there. Knowledge content. When we do our science, we are aiming for 3 things. One is increasing knowledge, one is increasing in wealth creation, and the third one is increasing quality of life. The general public are interested in 2 of those, wealth creation and quality of life. So the knowledge content, and this is what some of you have heard me say before, about we as scientists very often go, we look at the nice to know. I want to know everything. I was originally a benefit biologist and worked on fish and so on. I want to know everything. Actually, not what is nice to know, but what is need to know. And that's what the policymakers should do. So that's the third of these paradoxes, in case you're keeping count. The fourth one is about publication types, and that also refers to this. Natural scientists have one sort of publication, usually peer-reviewed papers. Social scientists have books, and there's a different degree of accessibility of those. The fifth one is the way we as scientists are either inside or outside silos. Now, I was at a meeting recently, and someone was commending the fact that there was a lot of good young scientists, and especially good young women scientists at the meeting. And she mentioned that thankfully there wasn't too many grey-haired old men in the room. And we discussed this a bit. And she then went on to make the point, she's a very good friend, we went on to discuss the fact that you need people to synthesize and present information from a wide view. And the problem is that those young, very good scientists probably cannot afford to take the wider view. They have to finish their PhD, which is on that very narrow band. It's only the older, grey-haired men and women that can afford to think outside the silo. So, thinking outside the silo. And then the last one is, and you've all done this, and we've all done it, looked at the research projects and how research projects are designed, and many of them are designed to answer very specific questions. And what we're almost needing is also research projects that are there to take information from a much wider view, to look across the piece there. So, we've got a lot of problems. I think we know the problems, we then have to try and find the solutions. There's something that Ms. Weiss said earlier, and I was involved in the Elbe and dredging problems, and we had a large Interreg project that was coordinated by Port of Hamburg, and we could give the science, the scientists could give the science, but then it was up to politicians and society to take the view. And in fact, one of the comments I made was that Hamburg as a port has a problem because it's in the wrong place. If you wanted to build a port to take the size of ships it wants to take, you wouldn't build Hamburg there. But there's no point in telling the local people in Hamburg that they're in the wrong place. So perhaps you can't have good natural systems and a port there. We need one or the other. Scientists can give the information, but then society takes the view. But scientists are all part of society as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. And now, panelists, please go back.
When people suddenly leave me, I wonder what I've said.
So, Mr. Parr, you are now here as the Parliament member Ms. Fight had to leave. So, you have a long-standing experience in various legislative processes. And so, what is your opinion and experience about integrating science in policy making and reacting on current research results in politics decision? Especially, of course, we are interested in environmental issues.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I can make it briefly because President Fight already was mentioning and discussing the different points of views. I'm already involved in legislative procedures and managing lawmaking since 38 years in Parliament. So this is a long perspective, and I was involved on the national level in the first 10 years, especially in environmental policy and decision making, and then in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern in all areas, and from the very beginning in the work of the Baltic Sea Parliamentary Conference also. And I can only underline what President Fight has already said, especially when it comes to environmental affairs. Scientific results are of crucial importance for the politicians and the decision makers, because the more it goes to technical details, the more it goes to research results, the more politicians, especially parliamentarians, have to rely on the results which they can get from scientists and scientific research. And therefore, I only can remind that we tried to include as much as possible scientists and current research results in the decision-making processes since many, many years. In Germany, we have this council of experts for environmental questions, and this was, for example, from the very beginning, a possibility not only to react on here and there special results, but also was given an overview on the development, and policy could react not only in single questions, but also follow the whole development and had a perspective to make decisions not only in special legislative procedures. And I was also managing this, the first secretariat of protecting the Earth's atmosphere in the German Parliament, and this was a very, for me, very good and the best possibility to bring scientific results and research results very near to politicians. And this is where I wanted to come back to the question of Professor Bartmann. This is a process where experts and parliamentarians are sitting for 2, 3, 4 years together and discussing a special wide future theme and topic. And in this process, scientists learn a little bit more about the pressures of politicians and how to present their results. And on the other hand, parliamentarians are integrating the results in their work much deeper as in any other way. And we call it in German this nice word Enquete-Kommission. And this is maybe, apart from expert hearings, the best possibility to come to more common results, because it's of crucial importance that both parts are discussing with each other. Not only one side awaits something and the other side is researching, and at the end there is a result, but politicians have no time to read it. We have studies about this, how much time for each parliamentarian per week is there to read scientific results. In the whole of Europe, I think it's 1 hour per week, and in Germany I was reading there are 4 till 5 hours still. This is too little to pick up results, and therefore such a method as it was presented by Ms. Johansson can help. Of course, and all what is helpful to pick up results and the possibility to rely on it makes decision processes easier. And of course, for politicians it's most important that, and this is what Professor Bartmann said, scientific results must be clear. And very often politics are confronted with doubts of the scientists. And as long as they can not say at the end, yes, this brings negative developments in that and that way very clear, then they can't convince their voters. They must go home and say, if we press you to give money for something or to be loaded with some regulations and measures, then it must be accepted. And it will only be accepted if they say there is no other way as to do it and to go through it. Yeah? And therefore, my only advice is also for the future to increase communication between the two worlds, bring them together, and then it's in the long term, in certain areas, easier to push some results into reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's possible that also in other countries are similar scientist, parliamentarist associations where it's very much encouraged that you take part into these kinds of associations. I know that, for example, in Finland there is Tutkas, which is a regularly meeting parliamentarians and scientists association, which also makes sometimes some publications. And
maybe one remark more, on the international level we rely on the discussions and institutions and results of discussions of institutions, for example, as HELCOM. We have an observer status there and have some members who are always integrated in the work and try to convince the others that we must pick it up and support developments, for example, as the Baltic Sea Action.
Thank you. So time is running, and I think that now we would have the discussion so that everybody can be involved by comments or questions to the panel members.
One short question about different results. One short question about different results in scientific. when you have to consider these different results, does it play a role? Because there's results from scientists that may be paid by projects like bonus, but there are also results from scientists that paid by industry. I don't know, how do you consider these results differently?
There are, of course, always different interests behind some questions. And this is very often different attitude from different party groups. For example, if you have a scientific result what demands to press special industries to reduce their production or to come up with new methods, then you will have a party group who wants to protect a little bit or make it easier for industry, and other who are more involved in the question to reach the farthest, the best possibilities to save nature. And then you have different results, and in such a situation such a method may help, because you can then say this is much more proved and this is much more evidence-based than something else. But at the end it will always be a fight between majorities. But if you are discussing it in a very intensive way, then maybe both are coming nearer somewhere in the middle and find a compromise.
Then next one is Andres.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I have two nasty questions, so maybe two additions, Mike, to your list of controversies or conflicts or paradoxes, as you say. And one is this, Kaisa already mentioned, a wonderful program, 100 million euros, so many very interesting findings, and still in a legal documents it's written a policy-driven program. What's happening in reality, many of those projects are actually criticizing and showing shortcomings and failures and mistakes in policy. So is it correct to call it a policy-driven program, or we better call it policy-relevant program and policy-relevant agenda? And my second paradox is this, and that was actually not my question. A few days ago in this very conference somebody put me into corner by saying that, hey, you go around preaching that scientists must go out of the ivory tower and disseminate to broad public, educate those who elect Mrs. White and Mrs. Barr in the end, but we all know that scientists are enthusiasts of their ideas and their concepts and hypotheses, and scientists are excited. And in the same time, we know that for the good decisions, we need a critically upraised knowledge. A knowledge which has passed through a screen like your systematic analysis. So isn't this a paradox, a contradiction again? So what do you think about this? This is a question both to any of the panel members and as well as to SIF, maybe. Thanks.
Okay, shall I start? The first point, Andres, about the projects being critical of policy. I would put that as an optimistic way. I'm an eternal optimist. I have to be. I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan, which is a football team, which is not as good as it used to be. But I'm an optimist. If something is criticising the existing policy, as long as those criticisms get back to the policy makers, I think you could say it is policy relevant. No,
policy relevant.
It is doing something, yeah.
Yes. But driven, is it driven?
The policy driven, the driving bit would have to come from when the program was initiated. It's the guidance that says these are the sorts of projects we want, and that's when we come back to, and you mentioned it earlier, the nice to know and need to know. If you're asking for projects that are need to know, then someone has decided that they are policy relevant, policy driven. The other part, which I agree with you about, but let's call it evangelical science. And we all come across evangelical science, and we had a set of talks about it this morning. People are so passionate about their field that they almost exclude any criticism. And the two of the ones that come to mind at the moment, and we were talking about them today, one is climate change, and the other one is alien species. And they have these proponents of this and that and that. And I think with both of those, you could say that the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's not as bad as that group say, and it's not as good as that group say. It is in the middle. But we as scientists, and I think this was Sif's point about the stuff that Andrew is doing, is that we have to do our science rigorously. We have to be true to ourselves to do it. But there are people that aren't like that. The evangelical sciences, and we have to battle this. But good evidence is what's needed.
And there was a question?
Yeah, I was wondering. Thank you. I was wondering how scientific progress is actually going into the policy process. I mean, when you have a certain decision to make and you look for the scientific evidence, then it's one time scientific evidence and you one decision and you take them. But if scientific evidence goes into policy regulations, which lives for a while, I see that the science is progressing, but the regulations, they stay. Is there a sort of systematic way to update, improve?
Shall I try to answer that one? Because we are also suggesting laws and regulations and so on also once in a while. Of course, there is a delay there as well. Again, we are bad at handling delays. Politicians are bad at handling delays. We are bad at handling delays in the policy process as well then also. But there are delays. And it takes a while before you're getting that kind of amount of evidence and scientific facts on the table through the process of the various steps before you get the regulation. And that is also part of our kind of governance that should be actually proven, so you're not actually putting regulations and laws in vain, which are not good ones. So it's also part of the kind of very slow process in creating the regulations as such. But of course we have that as a background, and as more evidence we can get, the better it is also. Very often it's also that we have to look at the kind of societal consequences when you do the regulation also, which very often means then also what will be the costs and who will actually take the burden. And that is also then creating part of when we can actually take a regulation as well then. But I would say, and that's a word to you also coming from in the Brexit country, thank God for EU also, because that has been helping out in terms of getting the kind of burden and also the kind of a big truck in going in one direction for many of the countries also, helping out of the national legislation as well. So don't leave us.
I wish we didn't. I have my one vote.
So we may have one more question and a short answer, if there is. Yes, there's one.
It seems to me that evidence by itself is not that useful, and it tends to shape our beliefs about a system only, and the beliefs then lead to things like policy change or whatever. But the scientists in general think that evidence by itself is useful, but in fact evidence is shown time and time again to be really only one small step along the way. But as scientists, we need to move more into understanding how we can shape the beliefs of systems. I only have to look at gun control in America versus, say, UK or America or Canada, and radically different beliefs, yet the evidence is just about identical. it seems to me, what would your recommendation be in terms of scientists engaging in belief change?
Sid, you want to comment on this, or?
I don't know if I can comment on that. Just a short comment. Thank you for all your comments, I would say, first. And I think they have pointed a very, very good thing that if you don't need to do this kind of system, evidence-based, if everyone agrees, it's very simple, then the science can very easily be used in policy. The problem is that you have pointed out, several of you, when the scientists disagree, what do you do? Then systematically it could be a good idea. But I also say that what I really wish is, and I've thought very much about it, how to reach the policy. Your idea to sit around the table is very good. I think that's a very good idea if it's a continuous process as you describe it. My question is maybe who is sitting there? If you look at the diamond, who is sitting around the table? It's a very, at which level people are sitting around the table. And most of all, I would wish that we could have transparency. That also in policy makers there could be a transparent process so you can, as a citizen, could follow the process.
Yeah. If I can, Kaiser, just to pick up those 2 points. I mean, some of you have heard me talk before about what I call the 10 tenets. 10 things that you bear in mind when you're trying to get a decision. One of those is almost the natural science of the ecology, but the other 9 are to do with politics and economics and technology and so on. And there's culture and morals and ethics in there. And someone asked me why I hadn't got the one main feature of human existence that seems to be missing from those 10 was religion. And they asked me why I hadn't put religion in, and I said I know my limitations. But the fact that it's got culture and it's got morals and ethics and economics and all the other things in it, then I thought it did have religion there. But when we look at evidence, take something that's been mentioned a lot at this conference, and that is the change in the system, and the significance of change in the system. Now, scientists, we very quickly go to significance of change, and we go to our p-values and our t-tests and our statistics. And that's what we're comfortable with, as long as we've got enough data. So there is like statistical significance. There's also ecological significance. Things may change, but you can't really pick them up in numbers. But there is also societal significance. And I've always taken the view that if society thinks there's a problem, by definition, there is a problem, and we have to counter it. And we have to counter it with good evidence there. But if they think there's a problem, if they think that climate change isn't happening, then we have to counter that. So beliefs come into this, but we are all part of society in dealing with it.
So 1 sentence from the bar and 1 sentence from us, no more.
Only 1 sentence. It is very important that policy goes to science and tries to include scientific research results. But I think, and this was something what the Minister of European Affairs of Schleswig-Holstein at the discussion of the EU Baltic Sea strategy pointed out also. We must go vice versa also. Science, I think, and this is what I would like to encourage you, should invite politicians also to come to their discussions, to your discussions. I only can encourage you to invite as many as you can to make some problems aware, so that they will find maybe faster their way in policy decision making.
Thank you very much.
If I could do my academic career again, I would then choose actually behavioral economy actually. Because that is actually what counts. Economy, Kenneth Galbraith, he said that economy is the way of making astrology, making decent in view. But economy has been learning that they can't do such models, linear ones. They have to think about behavior instead, and also, and behavior is then actually shaping a lot of what the decision making as well. Also, so we have to acknowledge that, and that's a kind of an area that is a bit untouched. So that remains to be also researched upon.
Thank you very much. This has been a very, very interesting discussion. I'm sorry we have to finish it because of time is running. Really, thanks to all panelists, thanks to all of you for listening and your comments and questions. I have also something to announce you. Or advise you to follow the Bonus webpage, because Bonus is going to open a call, especially on synthesis. Decision making about this call is a little bit not completed yet, but the information will come, I would say, within a couple of weeks. The call is not going to be a very big one. The total amount is relatively small. Small, it means that there will not be too many projects. But the amount of funding, maximum funding per project is quite substantial, which will allow very substantial work on a topic that is selected for the synthesis work. It's not only just a little bit traveling money also, it's really something that very good work could be done. So follow Bonus webpage. I would say that even within this summer, in the end of this summer, the call will be opened. Thank you very much. This has been a really good session, I think. I hope you agree. And I wish you good rest of this conference and good trip back home.